restoration. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Abu Mughli. And so please, floor is yours, Dr. Abu Mughli. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Dr. Sohail. Thank you, Dr. Samir. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon and good evening from my part. And my appreciation to AMSET and to STEM Matters for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to speak to all of you. I am an engineer by education, so I think I fit very nicely within your association, although not in North America. Today we are celebrating the World Environment Day. As you know, the 5th of June of every year. It is the birth date of the United Nations Environment Program, which was established in 1972. And since 1974, we have been celebrating the World Environment Day. And every year we select an international topic to highlight and talk about and bring the attention of the global community for engaging people on these important matters. So this year we have selected the ecosystem restoration, the topic of ecosystem restoration, because of many issues that I will be talking about. And yesterday, in fact, we had the global launch of the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, and it was addressed by His Eminence Imam Al-Azhar, His Holiness Pope Francis, the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, and the United Nations Secretary General, and many other dignitaries. So if you allow me, I will share my screen, and then I will speak about the subject. I hope you can see my screen. Can you give me just an indication if it is seen or not? Okay, thank you very much. So, you know, everybody now understands that we are facing multiple crises, and what we call them the triple planetary crises, represented by climate change, nature degradation, and pollution and waste. And we have seen over the past couple of decades increased weather events, whether it is sea level rise or floods or typhoons, or even forest fires and hurricanes, sandstorms hitting major cities and disrupting airports and lives in many countries around the world. Now, as I mentioned, one of the three crises that we are facing is ecosystem degradation. And we have been witnessing, and the science tells us that 1/3 of our ocean and the commercial fish stock is overfished. We have more than 66% of marine ecosystems being degraded or damaged. More than 420 million of hectares of forests have been converted to other uses since 1990. And the case in the rainforest areas, where it is estimated that the area of Switzerland is being chopped up every day to make areas for agriculture rather than forestry. The inland, natural inland and wetlands have been seeing degradation by more than 35%. And if we want to go back to history to the 1700s, it has been more than 87% that has seen a decline in these areas. So the size of the problem is humongous, and ecosystem degradation is currently impacting 4 billion people, so more than 50% of the population of the world. In addition to these three planetary crises, we, of course, all are facing the coronavirus, the pandemic that we are facing, and the causes are most probably due to the zoonotic diseases that are arising from the interactions between humans and wildlife. And this is causing socioeconomic problems around the world. You know, we know markets have been closed, airports were closed, places, even worshipping places were closed for quite some time. So in addition to this and the triple crises, we are facing unprecedented environmental challenges. But what is the cause of all of this? Now, as you know, we are around 7.8 billion people. In maybe 2030, we will be 9 billion people or more. So the population is increasing, thus increasing the demand over natural resources, the demand for food, the demand for water, and demand for land, and so on. So that is one major impact. The other impact is, of course, urbanization. And currently, there are more than 60% of people live in urban areas, requiring housing, requiring road systems, infrastructure, and all of that leads to destruction of natural resources. Of course, industry and the non-sustainable industry that is causing the increase in the levels of CO2, and currently we are more than 420 megatons of CO2 in the atmosphere. And beside all of that, we waste a lot of our food and our resources, more than actually the new figures say that more than 40% of our food is wasted. More than 30% of it is wasted even before it gets to our tables for consumption. And at the same time, 1 in 9 people go to bed hungry, not having access to food resources. So there is an imbalance and inequity all over. So these are very important issues that we need to tackle. Now, why are we doing all of this? Of course, you know that in 2015, world leaders have met, and 193 countries have adopted the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, putting emphasis on the prosperity of the people on a livable planet in peace and in partnership. And these 17 goals address issues of poverty, food security, health, but as well as the planetary issues such as energy, water, life above land, life underwater, and so on and so forth. So it is a must that we, the international community, works in tandem and in cooperation and coordination to achieve those goals that would provide a better future for humanity. So are we there? Are we implementing and achieving those sustainable development goals? Well, the science says that we're not moving fast enough to achieve them. Still, some of the indicators used for these sustainable development goals have not been agreed upon. and for others, there's still no methodology for measuring those. And that is, as I mentioned, part of it is the life on land and life underwater and, the water resources and so on. And all of that, of course, constitutes the ecosystem. As I mentioned yesterday, we launched the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration that was agreed by the nations of the world for the decade starting 2021 this year. It has started in January until 2030. So what is the decade and who is managing it? The international community agreed that UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, both entities, both UN entities, take the lead in launching and monitoring and implementing the decade with, of course, all stakeholders and all players who are engaged in this decade. So it is rather a platform for engaging the international community at all levels to achieve the goals of the Rio Conventions, being biodiversity, climate change, or desertification, and the goals of the SDGs. And of course, a website has been established. In addition to my work, my program has come up with a special or specific strategy for engaging faith-based organizations and faith leaders in the implementation of the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, and these resources are available on our website. So there have been 3 pathways have been agreed upon to take us into the implementation of the decade. The first one is creating a global movement and generating awareness around the issues related to ecosystem restoration, introducing the ethics, the values, the morality, the spiritual values of or having to deal with ecosystem degradation and restoring it. Also, the second path is bringing the political will by leaders and champions of the world, whether they are political leaders or religious leaders or community leaders from across all sectors, and generate that dialogue among them to achieve the purposes and the vision of the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. And of course, the third one is technical capacity, because you cannot run and implement something without providing the proper knowledge, scientific knowledge and feedback, and do the proper research and include and integrate the indigenous knowledge, because we know that traditionally people have been living in harmony with nature. So we need to understand how and what are these mechanisms that have been providing the necessary resources to communities without infringing on its sustainability. So in terms of technical capacity building, of course, we will be running some exercises, some trainings and research, but also we will be sharing best practices from around the world and from across sectors. A task force has been established for that purpose, for capturing the good practices and lessons learned, and it will be documented in different forms and provided to those who would need to learn from it. And certainly one document will be on the practices of faith-based organizations and religious leaders in ecosystem restoration and dealing with ecosystems. Indeed, nothing can be run without having a monitoring system to make sure that we are on track. Of course, cutting across the different areas where we work, for example, the terrestrial ecosystems, the aquatic ecosystems, and the socioeconomic drivers of the ecosystem restorations. And we have been involving 270 experts from more than 100 organizations. Scientifically, as we are, the UN is a science-based organization, specifically UNEP, we want to work on the scientific evidence and provide that evidence to whatever we do, which will provide credibility and legitimacy, and of course, monitoring indicators to measure the implementation of the decade. Nothing can run without a financial system. And, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for financing sustainable development talks about the different approaches to financing sustainable development, but specifically with the leadership of the World Bank, we are working on providing some financing for the decade of ecosystem restoration to achieve its targets. We cannot, of course, do anything without the engagement of young people who are the drivers. They represent more than 70% of the global population. In some areas, it might be more or less, but they are a very strong force taking us to the future that they are making and they will be leading. So as I mentioned, the launch was yesterday with the dignitaries from around the world, and we have engaged more than 50 heads of organizations. And for anybody who's interested to launch an ecosystem campaign, can use our resources that have been made available in different languages, at least the official 6 languages of the UN, but also they are being provided in different languages, and it will give you plenty of resources to know what, as an individual or as an organization, what you can do. Now, what after the launch and what after the World Environment Day? We ask people and organizations to register their activities so we can capture, and that is part of the monitoring and recording and in measuring the impact and whether we are reaching our goals or not. So please join the Decade campaign and register your activities online. Now, as I mentioned, we are facing unprecedented challenges, but that requires also unprecedented approaches and responses. And as you all know, Albert Einstein said, you cannot solve the problems with the same kind of thinking that created the problem. So we have to get out of the box and creatively think about other ways and mechanisms. And from there, we need to do that, but we need to do that ethically. And of course, we all know the fourth industrial revolution that we are currently living in, which is the revolution of technology, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence, and so on. But in fact, what we need an ethical revolution or a behavioral revolution that would change our consumption and production patterns and our attitude towards the environment and how we deal with the resources. And we need to do that innovatively and, of course, in collaboration with all stakeholders. Now, why have we considered the faith-based organizations and faith leaders and this sector of the society? Well, I mean, the research says that more than 84%, in fact, believe in something. They associate themselves to a religion. So if you ask 8 out of 10 people, they would say we are either Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, and what have you. So they have a point of reference or a standard set of ethical approaches and ethics. We know that faith leaders do exist everywhere. So wherever you go to any corner of the world, you would find either a priest or an imam or a monk, and they are trustworthy. They are believed in. They lead communities. They provide, approaches that are spiritually connected to the people. And we have seen lately the engagement of faith-based organizations in environmental issues. However, we know that faith organizations have existed for centuries and have been providing socioeconomic support to local communities and to their followers. But most importantly, the one thing that all religions agree on is what we called environmental stewardship, which is called in different manners in different religions, but in essence, it is environmental stewardship, our responsibility towards earth and nature. But in addition to their outreach and their importance in the community, they are important economic power. Currently, the research says that faith institutions own, or they are the fourth largest economic power on earth. So imagine how important economically these religious institutions. They own more than 50% of schools. They own more than 50% of health systems worldwide. They own more than 5% of commercial forests, or 8% of habitable land on earth. In addition, there are millions and millions and millions of houses of worship around the world. These are buildings. These constitute part of the urban areas. So they consume energy, they produce waste, and they use water, and so on and so forth. So the economic power of faith institutions is humongous and cannot be overlooked. Therefore, in UNEP in 2017, we came up with the strategy for engaging with faith-based organizations, and we launched the Faith for Earth initiative. Our mission is to work with faith leaders and faith organizations by empowering them, engaging them specifically and especially on the policy area, where we engage them in dialogue with decision makers and policy makers who come up with decisions around environmental sustainability. And our vision is to get to a world where we and all creatures live in balance. So the three main goals of our strategy and our Faith for Earth initiative is, the first one is the engagement at all levels, global, regional, local, national, even community level, where we bring faith leaders to dialogue, to inspire, to work with communities in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and environmental sustainability. The second one is to work with the wealth of faith-based organizations in greening them, because organizations, whether they are faith-based or non-faith-based, they invest to make resources to be able to give to charity or build schools and what have you. And we have learned that religious institutions, like all others, they invest, for example, in oil and gas and sometimes environmentally non-sustainable practices. So we want to green those investments, in addition to greening the assets, the buildings, the houses of worship of such organizations. And the third goal is linking the common areas between science and religion. So we want them to be mutually supportive, where we provide the scientific evidence for faith leaders and faith organizations to go and talk with scientific facts when they preach and teach about their spiritual reflections on the environment. And at the same time, we want to bring the spiritual value behind science. So we are bridging the between science and theology or religious studies. Now, what do we aim to achieve? We are launching the Global Faith for Earth Coalition, and the coalition will be constituted of 4 councils. The first one is the Council of Eminent Leaders. So we want to have, Imam al-Azhar, the highest Buddhist figure, the highest Hindu, the highest Jews, Pope Francis, together in one sitting, and to convey one coherent message to all religious followers on the importance of environmental sustainability. And that would be done regularly on issues related to the different areas of environment, whether it is ecosystems, climate change, water, energy, and what have you. The second one is the Council of Youth. As I mentioned, youth are a humongous power that have been leading some activism work. And we need to bring the young faith leaders into this movement and amplify their impact. And also we want to bring the CEOs, the executive directors, the managers of faith-based organizations who are actually implementing projects on the ground, on providing support to local communities. But bringing them here in this setting will bring the environmental sustainability into their work. And the fourth one is the Science Faith Consortium that I talked about, to bring scientists with religious scholars. And we have been working on integrating the religious values, the spiritual and morality into the design of UN environment programs, where if we talk about green economy, for example, we integrate the principles of Islamic finance, for example, or we learn from Islamic finance in implementing green economy policies and so on. And of course, we want to provide the evidence and a knowledge platform for whether scientists or religious or religion followers to look at our policies as related to their beliefs and their values. And the connection of all of these councils will be interconnected, where the Council of Eminent Leaders would provide the wisdom, the theology, the leadership, and the faith and science consortium will provide the scientific evidence and so on. So what have we been doing over the past 3 or 4 years? We have established a huge network. More than 4,000 faith leaders are engaged in our activities. We have accredited more than 50 faith-based organizations, and accreditation is important because it gives a seat for those organizations at the table of decision makers during our United Nations Environment Assembly, which is the General Assembly of UNEP, where policies and decisions are made. And we have launched national programs. We have launched one in India, one in Lebanon, and one in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we are hoping to launch soon one in Ethiopia. And of course, we are considering other countries to launch national programs where we can achieve all the global objectives at the national and local setting. Importantly, as I mentioned, to connect theology, environmental, religious scholarship and beliefs into the work of the United Nations system, and specifically UNEP. So we have integrated the spiritual values into what we call the midterm strategy for UNEP, which will take us into year 2025. So we have come up with a strategy to engage faith leaders and organizations on climate change issues, on nature action, and on chemicals and pollution. And that has never been done before, and it's the first time ever that this happens, and faith and religions are mentioned specifically in a midterm strategy for United Nations Environment Program. Last October, we held a global conference. We called it Faith for Nature, where we brought more than 450 faith leaders, all gathered over 3 days and discussed what can we do. And they issued what we call the Sacred Commitment Declaration, which is available on our website in 8 languages. And basically, they are calling the UN system to integrate the religious values and spiritual values into the environmental sustainability and the multilateral environmental agreements, the work of UNEP, and so on. And luckily, we have Iceland, one of our member states, taking the lead and proposing a UN resolution on the role of faith-based organizations in environmental sustainability and nature restoration, climate change, and so on and so forth. So we hopefully we will be discussing this resolution in February 2022 when the United Nations Environment Assembly meets. Now, as I mentioned, one of the issues that we're working on is creating a knowledge platform, and we have engaged with many educational and knowledge platforms such as the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, such as University of Connecticut, the Parliament of World Religions, and many, many other organizations to provide some coherent knowledge platforms and systems. We ourselves have created more than 250 web pages talking about different subjects. We have launched online courses, what we call MOOCs, the massive online courses. We have issued policy papers and guidelines. There is guideline on greening houses of worship. There's guidelines on biodiversity and many others. Definitely, we believe in intergenerational and gender responsive dialogue, and this is what we have been engaging the different aspects. Yesterday, we had an all-women webinar talking about women leadership on religions and faith and indigenous people on the issue of ecosystem restoration. We have had a number of interactions with young people and the Youth Assembly that is part of the United Nations Environment Program major groups. And as I mentioned, we have launched the national chapters in different countries, engaging with schools, engaging with even political leaders and scientists, and engaging them on the ground activities, for example, cleaning rivers and beaches, or planting trees, or conducting campaigns, and so on and so forth. Now, what are the role of faith-based organizations in all of this? And, you know, as I mentioned, they have the mobilization power. Faith leaders and faith organizations can mobilize around their theology, their religious studies, masses of people. So, and they can run campaigns that they do from a spiritual perspective. Advocacy, they can impact legislations, and we know in some countries their constitutions are actually based on religions, and so religion plays a major role in decision-making system. They, as I mentioned, they own more than 50% of the schools at the global level, more than 67% of the schools in Africa. So the educational system is a conducive environment to bring about, you know, the understanding on environmental sustainability and the spiritual value. And of course, there are so many organizations currently providing some on-the-ground projects, for example, providing renewable energy sources for people in remote villages. So this is the strategy for engaging with the ecosystem restoration from a faith perspective, and it is available on our website. Now, so what are the 10 actions that constitute the decade of ecosystem restoration? The first one is a global movement. And as I mentioned, part of it will be the Faith for Earth Coalition, where it provides a movement by faith organizations into achieving the decade. One example is the Sikh group, who has planted 1 million trees last year in 1,820 locations around the world. Another one is financing restoration on the ground. So as I mentioned, more than 80% of the habitable land is owned by faith-based organizations. So they own assets that they can manage and restore the ecosystems within the areas that they manage, in addition to the houses of worship. Of all of this would require incentives, and the incentives are, and probably you have been hearing about the divestment movement, where some faith organizations, for example, the Association of Muftis of North America, I'm not sure what it is called in fact, but they have committed to divest from oil and gas, and they have set a target to do so within the next 10 years. Of course, we need leadership. Nothing can work without, proper leaders driving the inspiration and the motivation, and we have seen Pope Francis in Laudato Si. We have seen Patriarch Bartholomew, the Aga Khan, but also from the Muslim community. We are working. Yesterday, Imam Al-Azhar has given a very powerful message on our responsibility from an Islamic perspective on restoring ecosystems and water management, and he addressed many aspects of environmental sustainability. And UNEP is working with more than 12 Muslim scholars in coming up with what we call Al-Mizan, which is a covenant for the earth. And hopefully, inshallah, it will be published very soon within this year, and it will be a powerful sustainable development strategy from an Islamic perspective, where we touch upon every single thing that addresses sustainable development from an Islamic perspective. So we need such a leadership. All of this will change behaviors and will impact the attitude of the people that follow a spiritual belief. Definitely, all of this would require a lot of research, and we have been doing a lot of research on how religions are addressing different issues like climate change from an Islamic perspective, how Islam relates to the corruption on earth and on the sea and air and so on, and that God does not love wasters, and he has commanded us to live in balance with everything that is around us. So all of that will be done in a research and provide some guidance and guiding principles for engagement. Definitely, as I mentioned, all of that requires capacity building, and we have 2 days ago, celebrating the World Environment Day, have celebrated a program that we have launched in India, where more than 100 organizations from India participated in the capacity building training, and 20 faith leaders from India have been assigned as the Faith for Earth counselors, leading faith-based work on environmental issues in India. And of course, we need to provide the guidelines, for example, the houses of worship, where it can be found on our website, and it brings in examples from many religions and many localities all over the world, where and how these organizations and these houses of worship have actually used ecosystem or lived within ecosystem approach and have greened their premises. And we need to prepare, of course, the next generation. And as I mentioned, the Youth Council of the Faith for Earth Coalition is working on bringing the next generation to be the leaders of this decade as we go along. And then, of course, from all of the experiences that are existing or will be generating, we will learn and, of course, convey those lessons learned to other organizations that are engaging with us. And one of the issues that we will be doing is mapping the nature-based solutions being implemented by faith-based organizations. Last year, during the World Environment Day, we have launched with the Vatican the Living Chapel, which was launched in the Botanic Garden of Rome. And this artistic chapel uses recycled material. It recycles the water and promotes plantation of trees in the vicinity of the chapel, but also in the cities that come and visit, and they take the saplings and plant trees. Today, just 3 or 6 hours ago, we have launched the Hope Cathedral in Norway. The Hope Cathedral is a worship place for all religions. So Muslims go and pray there, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, and so on. So it's a space or a place where it brings all religions together to work in harmony, to enjoy coexistence and promote coexistence. But at the same time, the whole structure of the cathedral is built from reclaimed plastic from the oceans. So there is a huge message out there that we can recycle, we can reuse, and we need to stop polluting our oceans and our waters and our lands with plastic and other waste. So we have launched it today, and it's available as a case study for all those who are interested in greening their houses of worship. So this is what I have for you today. I believe I have been on time. I did not take much of your time in speaking to you, but I am happy and willing to discuss and take questions. Thank you very much.